Hi, I'm Kathryn Jean Lopez from National Review and the National Review Institute. And I'm so grateful to Nir Salomon for joining me. He's the executive director of Efrat in Israel, and he's joining me from Israel, from Jerusalem, I believe.
It's
But
outside. We're actually on the hills of Judea and Samaria. It's absolutely beautiful.
oh, beautiful! Too
And
bad we
so,
can't do this
yes,
outside.
yes, that is true.
Well, the last time I saw you in person, it was in Jerusalem. That's why I have
Correct. Our
Jerusalem in
warehouse
mind.
is in Jerusalem. Our offices are here. You're catching me at home.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for making the time. And so, Efrat is a pregnancy care or resource in Israel, which I think probably a lot of Americans, when they think of they think of Israel, they don't think of the pro-life movement necessarily. And so, could you? Efrat's been around for almost 50 years now. Could you
Correct.
explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so it's right to not think when you think Israel to think the pro-life movement because Israel's really a life-affirming country.
Mhm.
So the reality is people do not look at abortion as a form of birth control, and it's not something that is. I see after the elections and before the recent elections, some people triumph abortion. Some people are doing spite abortions, which is just insanity, right? However, the woke mentality and the extreme left does lend itself to every culture.
Mhm.
So in Israel as well, this idea of, well, every woman has a right on her body, which she does, doesn't have to extend to, applauding abortion. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, sometimes it leads to that. So that happens in this country as well, unfortunately. But for the most part, women are considering this terrible decision of terminating their pregnancy because of financial and emotional environmental pressures.
Mhm.
And that's where Efrat comes in. So
Mhm.
we target the message very, very carefully. We're not anti-abortion. That's not what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
But we're probably, as a single organization, we probably save more lives than any organization, I think, in the world. We help over 3,000 women prevent abortions every year in Israel.
Mhm.
So I know a lot of my Christian friends from the United States doing amazing work. For one crisis pregnancy center, I don't think there is one that has those numbers. So we're very, very effective,
Mhm.
but we are all across the country. And what we do is we use volunteers in every neighborhood in the country to befriend a woman and just be there by her side. Because most women, if they were really given a choice, and that's what we should be focusing on. If they were given a choice, they would probably not have an abortion, not the other way around.
Right.
So most of these women are not, they are not given a choice. We are giving them the true choice, and a woman is programmed physically, mentally, emotionally to be a mother. And we have so many women, unfortunately, that weren't blessed with children and yearn to be mothers. And they don't have that ability. And here there are women considering terminating their pregnancy. I can just share with you an amazing story that
Please.
just happened last night. I mean, it's a terrible story and an amazing story. Nothing to do with the Efrat, but here in Israel, there was a terrible terrorist attack last night. A couple was on their way to the hospital to deliver their child.
Oh my goodness.
And unfortunately, they were attacked. The husband is severely wounded, and the woman who was pregnant was killed. And in the hospital, and I heard the interview with the doctor, it's just remarkable. Within 60 seconds, they performed a C-section and saved the life of the unborn child.
Oh my goodness.
So he's in difficult condition, and we should be praying for this unbelievable child, born unfortunately to a mother who is not going to be raising him, but he is going to carry, God willing, if he survives, her legacy. And that's how much we cherish life. And if God gives you such a gift, I can't even imagine. I want to say this, and I know it's so difficult because as we speak at 4 o'clock, I believe. Israel time, the burial was called for.
Mm.
As we speak, this child's mother is being buried.
Oh my goodness.
But I can imagine at least she has that joy to see that the baby has survived. as she winks at him from heaven.
Mm,
I think she's probably, telling him, "Thank God you survived. I was on the way to the hospital to go for a delivery, and here, God was the one to deliver you. Less than 60 seconds to do a C-section." The reporter was couldn't even believe it. They said, "Yeah, as they are doing resuscitation on the mother, they actually did a C-section and saved the baby." And
wow.
which is just, again, remarkable.
And and that's what the medical profession should be, seeing that they have two patients in front of them, right? Not just
Es-
one.
Especially when she's on her way to delivery, of course.
Right,
And they
right.
wouldn't risk the mother's life to do this, I'm sure. I'm
Sure.
sure they wouldn't. But here you have an unborn child. It's actually quite interesting because the news, which is not so right wing, the news that I was listening to this morning, is not so conservative. I would say if they went on the abortion issue, they wouldn't be, quick to be anti-abortion. They said something fascinating. They said within less than 60 seconds, they extracted the baby. What does that mean? Right? Extracted the baby. In other words, there was a child there that just needed extraction.
Mm,
Right? So the mother's womb oftentimes is this wonderful, loving space that the child grows in for 9 months, and all of a sudden now became a booby trap
mm,
because there was no nutrition. The mother was unfortunately not functioning, right? And all of a sudden you're extracting her. That was quite revealing, I have to say. So here you're extracting a baby, which basically they were talking about a live human being that they
mm.
needed to extract, right, from the mother's womb, which unfortunately probably was not functioning at that point in time. That's my assumption. So unfortunately, it was God's rule that the doctors didn't succeed to save her, and may God avenge her death and not us. And the baby will continue, living on her legacy, which is amazing.
Wow. I was just listening last night um uh to a debate, part of a debate that happened at Georgetown University just the other night. And the person who is arguing for the pro choice side, the abortion advocate side, was making the argument that if the baby only has personhood, is only a human life when the baby is delivered, at the point when the baby is delivered. Well, thanks be to God, those doctors didn't look at it that way, um,
Correct.
for that young child. Um,
Correct.
and there is something arbitrary about saying, well, just because the baby is now outside of the malfunctioning womb, right? Now the baby is a human being. No, the baby was a human being, as the mother was ready to deliver her, wanting to deliver him. um what an amazing miracle story.
Yeah.
And yeah, God rest her soul. And we pray for this child, and that the father survives, as well,
Amen.
so there's not more
Amen.
tragedy.
Yeah.
um can I ask you, how did you get involved in this work?
So that's a great question. So I'm actually an attorney and
Right.
a technology entrepreneur here in Israel. I studied also in the United States. I'm sure you can gather that from my English. I'm always proud to say, unfortunately, my father passed away 7 months ago, but I'm always proud to bring him as an example. My father grew up in Luxembourg, was a Holocaust survivor from Luxembourg,
Oh, God bless them.
grew up in the Dominican Republic because that's the place that he found refuge. Unfortunately, President Roosevelt shunned away boat after boat of potential refugees to save. I don't know how many, Americans know that, but there are tens of thousands of Jews that did not survive because President Roosevelt was not willing to accept them in the country, my father being one of them. But he was lucky to go to the Dominican Republic.
Dominican
And
Republic, wow.
nonetheless, my father at age 16 moved to the United States. He served in the U.S. Air Force. And
Wow.
later on, he served in the Israeli Defense Forces in the Yom Kippur War, in the U.S. Air Force in the Korean War. So I feel very much, both an American and an Israeli. But the way I got involved was actually years ago, over now it's already 22 years ago, or 21 years ago. Someone came to me and we had a falafel store, if you're familiar with
Yeah,
falafel,
sure.
very common in Israel. And but we used to have hamburgers and steaks there as well. And somebody that we used to give charity to said, "I need you to cook a meal for a bereaving family." I said, "What happened? Somebody passed away, and it's a family that's supported by Efrat." I said, "What is Efrat?" And he said to me, some women, because they can't afford a crib, feel like they have to terminate their pregnancy. I said, I don't believe you. That doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, that's what happens. So then I got involved and more involved and more involved, and I've been volunteering for the organization for close to 20 years. And the last 3 years, after the founder and head of the organization passed away, I was called in to become the new executive director of the organization. And I couldn't leave mothers unanswered, women that are in so much pain, in so much anguish, not, to continue pushing this organization forward. And not only that, grow. Not only that, grow. We've grown into all kinds of different programs we could speak about. And the realities is, I feel I just had to be there for these women. And I have the great merit to have been doing this for the past 3.5 years.
Well, so you talk about growth. Right before we started recording, you were telling me you're opening a new warehouse. I was in your warehouse in Jerusalem a few years ago, and I was kind of overwhelmed by you gave the tour, and you're showing us all the different material supplies, care packages for new moms and diapers and everything you'd expect to see, and the different programs and for you coming from the United States, knowing that most people don't even think about abortion in Israel in the same sentence, to see the almost you walk in and it's almost like an embrace for mothers, like anything you could possibly need, we have for you here, including, oh, by the way, the first thing, love. We care about you, right? Yeah. So, what's kind of your standout program? What do you love to tell people about the most when it comes to Efrat?
So before Efrat, I want to tell you that I have the privilege of connecting with different pro-life organizations in the United States. And one of the things that pain me most is what the media does to them because they are overwhelming lovers of women.
Right.
And men,
Mm-hmm.
and their fathers and their children, but this notion that all the pro-life movement cares about is the unborn child is such an atrocity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it happens because people talk about the rights of the unborn child. We don't. We always come from the perspective of the woman, but what's so negative about speaking about the rights of an unborn child? Why is that so negative? But that's not what they do in their centers. In their centers, in these pro-life centers in the United States, they shower women with love.
Mm-hmm.
They should really be getting, the highest accolades from the community because they're showering women with love. And that's really what we do here in Israel. So the biggest program is, first of all, the love, like you said. That's
Mm-hmm.
really one of our women that we've helped many, many years ago. She actually became pregnant in Israel, but discovered she was pregnant when she was in Phoenix, Arizona. And she tells me, she describes this story. She says she's in Phoenix, Arizona, and she skipped a period and she realized, I don't know, maybe it's the heat. It's so hot over here in Phoenix, Arizona. Maybe the heat. And then when another month went by, she got a little weary. What's going on? And she said, I took 6 pregnancy tests. All of them were positive. And she
Oh,
says, I freaked out so emphatically that I screamed that I think that all of Phoenix heard my scream. What do you mean?
oh,
I can't be pregnant now. So she tried to find out, how to terminate a pregnancy in Phoenix, Arizona. So she reaches out to a friend whose name happened to have been Efrat.
Oh,
That was
wow.
the name of her friend. And her friend Efrat says to her, wait a second, why are you having an abortion? She says, well, how am I going to have this child? What am I going to do? I'm all alone. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to make a living. I can't do this on my own. And the woman, her friend, says to her, "Well, what before you make that decision, please call up an organization in Israel called Efrat." And these were the words she described that made the difference. She said, "I called up the organization, not thinking anything about it, but I said, whatever, I'll just do it." And on the other line was an amazing woman who answered the phone. And she said her name is Ruth Tidhar. I don't know if you met her on the tour. She's our chief social worker. And she answered the phone and she said to this amazing woman, her name is Mali. She said, Mali, I don't know who you are. I don't really know what you're going through right now, but I just want you to know from this moment forward, you're not alone. Whatever you decide, you're just not alone. And Mali described it to me. She said, I felt as if I was falling off a cliff. And as I'm falling, this outstretched arm just grabbed me before I'm falling and is holding me now on that cliff and just pulling me back up to safety. So that's really the greatest thing that we can offer. However, when it's financially driven, we got to put money where our mouth is. So what we do is we isolate the financial pressure and we tell them what's freaking you out. So they say, well, how can I afford a bed? How can I afford a carriage? How can I afford baby clothes? We says, well, listen, let's assume you can afford them. Now what would you decide? And they say to us, what do you mean assume? We're going to afford them. We're going to send you a brand new crib, a brand new carriage, a brand new baby bath, clothing, diapers, baby bottles, everything, like you said, everything you could just imagine. And oftentimes when they come to visit our warehouse, they're shocked. Because, for example, one of the things that shocks them the most is we have strollers and we also have double strollers.
Hmm.
And they said, you're going to give me a double stroller? We said, yeah, we knew you need one. He said, how did you know it? He says, because the reason you're considering an abortion is because you have a young child and you can't imagine having another one. So now you need both of them in the stroller. And just when they see that we thought about them to such
Right.
depth, then they see the love. They're showered with the love. We provide diapers, baby formula, wipes for 24 months after the baby's born.
Hmm.
So now the woman just relaxes. Okay, somebody has my back, as they say. So that's the main program.
Hmm.
You could, I recommend everybody who's listening to this, read about it in israelbabies.com. You can read about these miraculous stories. But that's the main program. But one of the amazing programs that we've launched recently, actually it's already 2 years, is a program called Rise. And what that is, and this is after you visited the office. What that is a program which identifies women which we felt are having a harder time getting on their 2 feet, standing on their 2 feet. So what we do is we have a full-time vocational social worker in-house. She does for free, obviously, a vocational assessment on this woman, a complete vocational assessment. Then we take that vocational assessment and we connect her with training institutes and we somehow secure funding that is usually the government social funding, whatever we can get, so that she can go through that program. So now she has a program, she has funding for the program. However, if she doesn't stand on her 2 feet, we actually need to grab her by the hand to make sure she goes through the program, doesn't just go first day and then just
Sure.
disappears. But then she has a crucial problem. And that crucial problem is she has a newborn child at home. She needs to put that newborn child in daycare. She can't afford the daycare. So in Israel, if you're poverty stricken, since it's a on some level, a socialist country, you get benefits from the government. So you get subsidies for daycare. However, to get those subsidies, you need to prove that you're either in this program or you're working for 3 months.
Hmm.
How can she work for 3 months if she can't afford putting in daycare? So we actually fund the daycare for those 3 months. That's quite an expensive ordeal, but we know at the end of the day, it changes the trajectory of her life.
Mm.
And that's just absolutely amazing. So that's one of the, I would say, our prize programs. While we help over 3,000 women make the choice to keep the child, here we're talking about hundreds of women every year, and we're trying to expand that program. Obviously, we also need finances to do so, but we're trying to expand that program. It literally changes the trajectory of their lives.
Of course, of course. And you make it possible, in the United States, as you know, there's so much talk about choice from advocates of legal abortion. And and what you're doing is trying to make sure that women, not trying, making sure that women actually have a choice
Right.
to be the mothers that they already are. And you have a little bit of a freedom, perhaps, that we don't hear because you don't have to argue in the political zone as much as we do. Everything is political here about abortion, it seems. Here in Israel, it sounds like you can focus a bit more on the mother without all of those political considerations.
It's better in Israel.
Mm,
It's better. It's not free of the political considerations. In Israel, abortion is legal.
right,
It's if you look at the law books, it's actually illegal, except if you fit in within all these exceptions, which means practically it's legal.
mm,
Okay? So if a woman, and we believe this to be true, and if a woman has this sense that, okay, nobody's restricting her choice, then come talk to us because the people pushing her to have an abortion are restricting her choice. They're telling her, you can't afford the child, you can't raise the child, you're too young, you're too old, you have too many children already. I mean, a
right.
myriad, amount of cases. So if you're being pressured to have an abortion and being told that you don't really have a choice, and the choice is readily available to have an abortion, that's not fair. That's really coercive. That's very coercive. And women that we deal with all of the time come to us post-abortion,
Mm,
grieving, in pain. And they tell us, well, nobody told us. Nobody told us what I actually really did. That's not fair.
right.
So all of these pro-choice people in America that freak out, that imagery that the pro-life movement puts out, I also freak out at it. It's not pleasant to watch.
Sure, sure.
But a woman who is about to go through that procedure has the right to know so. I remember I had a wisdom tooth extract. I was young. I was 19 years old, I think. And the doctor made me sign all of these crazy waivers that I might this, I might that, I might die. Really? From a tooth extraction? And the abortion is such a crucial decision. Let's assume, which is not correct, but let's assume it doesn't have physical harm to the woman. Emotional harm, that's rather clear.
Right.
So it's not to say, I don't want to be, sound like every woman having an abortion is going to have emotional trauma. That's not true.
Hmm.
But if you compare the truth extraction and abortion, I mean, it's insanity, and that's just not fair. So if the proponents of pro-choice say pro-choice is a human right, so is information and knowledge. And
Right.
so is the support that if you want to have the child, at least equally, right? So when you talk about Planned Parenthood, if the government is funding Planned Parenthood, then they should equally fund the pro-life movement with equal finances.
Right.
Or don't fund that at all. We'll take care of ourselves with private, donations, and you take care of yourself. But don't have governmental funding in order because it's a healthcare issue. Yeah, it is a healthcare issue. To have an abortion is also a healthcare issue. Yeah, it's damaging to your mental health. It also has physical ramifications, but it should be, if you want it to be her choice, it should be her choice until the end. She should know what it's about, and she should have options available at her disposal. She should have the assistance that Efrat provides in every state in the union. And so, unfortunately, that's not the case. We try to make it the case here in Israel. But we do face politics. I won't say we don't. After the reversal of Roe v. Wade in the US, we were majorly attacked.
Mm,
And they said that we are going to bring the Christian right to Israel and ban abortions in Israel.
okay.
And we said, okay, that's not what we're going to do. But yes, we do want to help more women choose on the side of life. Why is that so difficult for you to understand?
Hmm.
And then they don't really have a way to respond.
Did things calm down a little bit after the end of
Yes.
Roe? Yeah,
Now we're in the middle of an existential war, so we're more focused on that.
there is that.
Yes, there is that. I have to tell you, last night, my wife has an organization that goes around the country to different bases and does barbecues for them, for the soldiers. So last night we were actually at a place, I mean, a humongous field base that was created only after October 7th.
Well,
And you realize this entire country is really so, so involved in its survival on a constant basis. So I've never seen it because I haven't served in the army. I came here, I was a little bit too old and I had already two children, and the army said, we don't need you or we don't want you, more correctly. I wanted to volunteer. I have a son and daughter that are today in the army,
well,
and for you coming to visit Israel, and for me living, in central Israel, Judea, Samaria included, we go to the store, we go to the movie theater, we have dinner at a restaurant. Life seems normal. And then when you go out to these humongous army bases, and you realize how large of a percentage of the budget of Israel goes towards the army, you realize we're really constantly in survival mode, absolutely
mm,
constantly in survival mode, which is very difficult. But we're praying that God will show us, reveal to us, his entire plan, which I'm sure is good, and we'll be after this absolute madness of constantly defending our survival.
well, and Efrat found itself stepping up to the plate after the attacks as well in a new kind of way, didn't you?
Listen, first of all, a lot of women were in a very peculiar position. So I'll tell you a few of the unique things that were happening. So one was there were women that were being pressured by their husbands to terminate the pregnancy. They already scheduled an abortion, or they scheduled to meet to go to an abortion clinic, and their husbands called us from the front lines and said, "You have to rush to my wife. She's about to have an abortion. You got to stop it."
Oh,
We said,
wow.
what do you mean we got to stop it? They said, well, we were the ones pressuring her to terminate the pregnancy because we lack finances. We're going through a very difficult time. But I can't imagine now that we're in the front lines and we see death in front of our eyes, I can't imagine we'll terminate the pregnancy of our own child.
Mm,
That was quite difficult to deal with. So we had to rush to these women, and these women were very confused. What are you talking about? My husband called you up? He didn't even call me. What's going on? He says, well, because he loves you so much. He cares about you so much, and he can't be by your side. He called us to be there for you. And children have been born as a result of that. That
no,
was a really major twist that we could not imagine.
right.
And the flip side also happened. Women who thought about keeping their pregnancies, and all of a sudden their husbands are out there, in the battlefield. Their businesses were abandoned, and they said, okay, while we planned on having this child, we can't.
Mm,
So we dealt with cases that we've never dealt with before.
wow.
And so that's one aspect of the cases. The other aspect was actually super positive because what we realized since we've been around for close to 50 years, tens of thousands, this is our estimation. We've helped close to 90,000 women to date have their children. Okay? If you think about that, the population of Israel is about 10 million. That's already a significant percentage of the population.
Wow.
And these are the close to 90,000 that we know of. We obviously know that our educational arm is even more powerful, right?
Mm,
But we just don't know who they are. So what we decided at the beginning of the war was to do two things. We said if there are a few tens of thousands of soldiers who are our own children, we have to attend to them. But we didn't know who they were. So what we did is we raised a fund to buy soft shell jackets to the soldiers up north and south when they were very cold. So we started driving ourselves to the edges of the border, literally, and we just handed these jackets to them. And then we discovered some of our children. And they said to us, wait a second, you're a fraud with the abortions. I'm alive because of you.
Oh
I
my.
mean, the stories are crazy, and I'll tell you one story that's overwhelming in a moment. But the flip side was we said, well, what about the mothers? So all of the evacuees who lived in all kinds of different places, the evacuees from down south and up north in Israel were evacuated from their homes. And they were displaced in all kinds of different hotels or settlements that they started building for them, whatever it might have been. So we bought like a trailer onto our car and we turned it into like a wish trailer. And what we did was we opened it up, we stopped at different locations, and we would just greet children and give them a present. Give them some kind of little toy or whatever it is. Again, it's really the love, it's not the toy itself.
Sure.
But we wanted to greet every child. So there were long lines, right? Well, our children are alive because of you. It just became extremely overwhelming to actually meet our children out in the field, the young children and those that are soldiers out in the field. So we had to deal with new cases and we discovered the impact of our work years later. So I'll just share with you one very powerful story. Maybe we have time for two, but this is an extreme story. A man calls us up. He heard that we had this drive for the coats. We raised money for 10,000 coats, not a lot of money. And he calls us up and he says, listen, I need coats for my son. I said, okay. And then he becomes very, very aggressive. But I had left 280, I believe it was 280 coats in my home, actually, not in the warehouse in Jerusalem. The last 280 were in my home. And he says, I said to him, how many do you need? He says, I need 280 jackets. So, okay, that's a little strange. I said to him, but why are you being so aggressive? He says to me, don't you know who my son is? I said, no, I don't. He says, my son is your son. I said, what do you mean he's my son? He says, 21 years ago, we were going to abort this child, and you just had a volunteer show up from nowhere, and befriended my wife, love, shower her with so much love and kindness that she and I fought every night because she said, I want to keep the baby. And I said, you can't. We don't have enough money. And you said, but this organization is going to help us out. He said, I didn't believe a word you guys said, a word, but I couldn't fight with my wife anymore. So we had this child.
Oh,
He says, and then when the baby was born and we were about to go home from the hospital, I was crying, the father says, because I knew I didn't have where to put this child to sleep. And when I arrived at home, outside of my door is a brand new bed, a brand new carriage. You delivered good on your word. He says, 21 years ago, you fought for his life. Today, he's fighting in the trenches, in the tunnels, in the canine unit, protecting you. Aren't you going to give him jackets?
oh wow.
And then you just realize the impact. You
Mm.
realize the impact. So I don't know if we have more time. I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
if
yeah.
you
If you, yeah, please.
Okay, so I want to share with you one more story, which I think needs to impact everybody listening, and everybody should know this story because it's a story that hits home to every community all around the world. There's a woman who contacts us and says to us, I need to become a spokeswoman for your organization. We look her up in our computers, she doesn't appear. We say, why? What did we do for you? She says, well, let me tell you what you did for me. She says, I was 41 or 43 years old. I'm trying to remember now. I'm forgetting but it doesn't make a difference. In her early 40s, and she has three children. The youngest is about to be 18 years old. She's divorced and now with a not the father of those three children, with another man. And she's in a wonderful, wonderful, loving relationship, but she has this vision of her new life, right? Her youngest is going to be 18. She's going to empty nest. She's going to start traveling the world. She has this beautiful idea, and all of a sudden, unexpectedly, she becomes pregnant. And she's like, okay, what am I going to do now? So she calls up her friends, her family, and everybody says to her, listen, you have to terminate the pregnancy. She says, of course, it's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I'm an older woman. I don't need another child right now. I use protection. Again, look how much it's in God's hands, right? I
Yeah.
use protections. I try to make sure I don't become pregnant, but I'm pregnant. She picks up the phone, calls a pregnancy, an abortion clinic, and as she picks up the phone, she has a flashback when she was 16 years old. She heard a lecture by the founder of our organization, Dr. Eli Shusheim of blessed memory, and he talked about the development of the fetus. And she says, what do you mean? I can't take the life of my own child. And she closes the phone.
Mm.
Anyway, she speaks to her friends, and only a few days go by, and she says, forget about this stupid doctor when I was 16 years old. I have to have an abortion. She picks up the phone again, and the same thing happens to her. She closes the phone because she's freaked out about, terminating her pregnancy. She goes for a short vacation. This is during COVID. She goes for a short vacation up north to some kind of Airbnb, and she wants a sign from God. She goes to a very special holy site, and she prays with her partner that God should give them a sign. Imagine, God should give them a sign that she can have this abortion and forget about this doctor when she was 16 and a half years old. They finish praying at this holy site and they walk down to the street. And the first thing she sees is a bus crosses that street with a sign of the Efrat organization that
Okay.
says, for the lack of finances, don't take a life. And she got angry. She said, God, that's not what I asked of you. I wanted a sign to have an abortion. I didn't want to see Efrat again. I want to have an abortion. But she says, well, I realized that that was God's sign to me. You need to keep this pregnancy. She said, I was not happy in doing so, but I did it. I kept the pregnancy. I carried the pregnancy to term and I had a beautiful baby boy born. I was happy on the one hand that I had this beautiful baby boy, but my plans of having this new life after empty nesting were crushed. And then she said the following. My second daughter, from the previous three, my second daughter became extremely attached with my son. 2.5 years later, I wake up on October 7th to discover that my second daughter, Moria, is missing. She was missing in the Nova from the Nova Festival. She discovers about 10 days later that her daughter was murdered by the savage animals. And I hate saying animals because they were much worse than that. Animals are wonderful and kind. The
Mm.
savage terrorists, and she lost her daughter.
Oh my God.
And she said, all I wanted to do is bury myself under the blankets and die. And then she realized she can't. She has a young child to take care of.
Oh my goodness.
And then she turns to God and she says, I get it. You don't always ask us. You didn't ask me when I became pregnant with my son, and you didn't ask me when you took away my precious daughter. But what I realized you did for me is you knew what's going to happen 2.5 years ago. And you knew that if I didn't have my son to take care of, I would no longer be alive today. So
Mm.
thank you. So she says, I don't want anybody to legislate against abortion. I want everybody to know that if God blesses you with a child, there's a reason.
Mm.
God blessed me with a child that I really, really, really did not want. And this child, not only did I have the unbelievable opportunity to save his precious life and bring him to this world, and who knows what great things he's going to do with his life. By bringing him into this world, he actually saved my life. Because my life without him, I don't think I would be alive today. And I think that that's what needs to touch every single person. You're pro-choice, beautiful. But just understand that we cannot easily become pregnant. I don't know what these people think, right? Pregnancy is actually a challenge. It's not so easy. If God blesses you with a pregnancy, there's a reason for it.
Mm.
And you should be by that woman, by her side, supporting her, helping her, encouraging her. If it's her choice, don't antagonize, Don't go burn an abortion clinic. Who does that? Everybody turns out the pro-life movement is burning abortion clinics. No, a few crazy fanatics did it. Okay, we're not responsible for them. But go love, educate, allow them to be aware of what they are about to do because you don't want them waking up a day after realizing, wow, if we would have known, we wouldn't have done that. That is not right.
How is Efrat supported?
Efrat supported by individual donors, by wonderful people who might be listening to this or might be reading some of the things that you write and say, listen, we can support. The one thing I want to say during the war, and I said this all the time, my son is a commander in the Golani Brigade, and my daughter it trains the outlookers, the girls that are on the border looking for invasions.
Mm,
And I say, listen, I have no ability to protect my child's life. I just don't. I can make sure they have the best bulletproof vest, the best equipment, but when they go into battle, they're all in God's hands. So this war is actually God's choice. We have to do whatever we can. We have to enlist in the army and go and do whatever we can. But the war on abortion is actually our choice. God already decided to send this soul down to the earth. He
mm,
already decided this woman is going to become pregnant. So if we pray to God and say, God, please spare the lives of the innocent from any war, spare their lives. We will do everything to help those women bring the children that you already sent down to this earth. So you can look up israelbabies.com, support us financially, like us on social media, connect with us, try to spread the word. Communities that are interested for me to come and speak, or we have other speakers, we'd be honored to come to speak in any community, any denomination, any place in the United States or around the world, if we can save another woman from making a decision she really doesn't want to make, and we can save another child so he can come and bless this world with his own special gift that God decided he has a special gift. That's why I send him down to this earth. We will do everything we can, and anybody who can support that is should be blessed.
and speaking of the United States, you're opening a pregnancy resource center in the United States?
Yes, we actually are in Florida. It's actually going to be, we already have services in the United States,
Okay.
and we've actually helped already over a dozen women directly have their children. And dozens are already being helped. So these are already children that have been born, and dozens are already being helped all throughout the country so that people can call up in an environment. It's the first environment for Jewish people, right? So I went and couple with my Christian friends and I said, listen, you want an environment that the women are very, very comfortable. And if you're Jewish, you feel more comfortable in a Jewish environment, just like if you're Christian, you feel more comfortable in a Christian environment. And some which are, not involved religiously, rather feel sometimes threatened either by Jews or by Christians, whatever it might be. You want to be in a comfortable environment. So it gives me great pride to stand, side by side with those that are really fighting for life, the life not only of the unborn child, but the life of the mother,
Mhm.
and don't necessarily need to restrict choice. That's not necessarily what we need to do. When a woman is given a real choice, she will choose life, but you have to give her a real choice.
Mhm. And did I also read that you're opening a maternity home in Israel?
In Israel, we actually have already, but it's
Okay.
not yet operational. We're renovating it. We will have a home that it's a shelter actually, right? So it's a shelter for women who have nowhere to live. So we will give them a beautiful, beautiful, next time on your visit, you'll see it. It's amazing. A beautiful apartment where different women are going to be living there with their children. So during pregnancy and for about 6 months after the baby's born, and we give them all the services in-house. So the vocational assistance, the vocational training, we make sure we get her on her strong 2 feet, and then we bring in another lady to populate that place. We're going to do the same thing in Florida. We already have the facilities, we're building it, and we're going to make sure that every woman who needs to be supported will be supported. There are beautiful, beautiful initiatives all throughout the country, and we want to give our share of help, not only in Israel, but for communities all around the United States as well. So the first center is going to be opening in Florida,
Wonderful.
Southern Florida.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for making the time, Nir Solomon, and it's israelbabies.com.
Correct.
And
Or you
Efrat,
could go to the Efrat website, Efrat, cribefrat.org. CRIB stands for the Committee for the Rescue of Israel's Babies. It sends you to same places, but you can approach it from different directions. There's
and
always
Efrat,
different ways.
why the name Efrat?
Efrat, the reason the name for Efrat is, we're told, actually in Chronicles, we're told that Efrat is the name given for Miriam, Moses' sister. She
Mm,
was the quintessential midwife and the woman who actually gave hope for the women in Egypt who were told that if they're going to have a boy, that boy is actually going to be killed. So some of the women and the men decided, well, we shouldn't become pregnant because if it's a boy, they're going to kill our child. And Miriam said, okay, that was Pharaoh's decree, but we go by the decree of the King of Kings. And the King of Kings says, he'll bless you. If he blesses you with a child, God willing, everything will be okay. And she was a midwife in Egypt that disobeyed the law of Pharaoh at the risk of her own life.
mm,
And she really gave countless amount of women the opportunity to give birth. But one of these women gave birth to her brother, right? Her mother gave birth to her brother, who ended up being Moses, the savior of the Jewish people out of Egypt. So we don't know the next child being born. We have no idea who it is. So at Efrat, we try to emulate Miriam's ways, give hope, shower with love, and we know that every child is a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous blessing. He has a specific blessing. I'll just leave you with this. I'm not a big purveyor of music, but my father was, and when he would listen to an amazing symphony, he would say that every single violin, every single harp, every single instrument, no matter what instrument it was, even if there were 10, 15 violins, every single instrument needed to be in that orchestra. We are all in the orchestra of God. And every single soul that descends to this earth is part of this orchestra. So we are here to help that beautiful woman who is part of the orchestra. And if she wants to continue breathing life, we're there for her to continue making this orchestra also more beautiful. So that's where the name Efrat comes from.
well, thank you so much. Women are capable of such amazing things.
Oh,
Um, if they're only given the opportunity and the support. And so thank you for helping women be courageous. Thank you for the work that you do, Nir Solomon from Efrat. I'm so sorry for the loss of your father. um, I know I don't stand alone in praying for your children on the front lines.
yes.
And please, I had the honor of meeting your wife. Please give her my regards, and I look forward to seeing you again in Israel. I hope before too long.
I will. Thank you. Looking forward to that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.